He had a couple heart attacks. Oh, I'm starting. Okay. We're going to start on chapter 3 today, the psychology of crime. We're going to talk about some of the crimes that have taken place over the last 10 years or so. Questions about causes of crimes or the concern of criminology, which is a study of crime and criminal behavior. And of course, this is not a criminology class. Criminology class is really kind of exciting. We were teaching a criminology class last semester when we had a social worker that had been a police officer. She had also been a detective. You know, how fascinating would that be, taking a criminology class from a detective? But she went back home. She was out in Shiprock, and she went back home. So she taught it one semester. Then she left. She didn't like Shiprock. Even though she was right there beside Farmington, I don't know. According to the National Crime Victimization Survey, the rate of violent crime has been dropping since 1999. So when one party says, we need to do something about crime, the reality is that it's just been going down since 1999. So over the last 20 years or so, it's been decreasing. So if one party says we need to crack down on crime and the other party isn't doing anything about crime, the reality is we've had both Democratic and Republican presidents in the last 20 years, and crime has been steadily declining. Any reason why crime would decline over the last 20 years?
Law enforcement?
It's gotten tougher. They started shooting people in the streets. So people are afraid to even do things. No, this can't be it. It must be something else. Could be. Maybe we have more cops out there.
Education?
Education's better than it used to be? No.
Policy, laws?
Anytime the economy is bad, we have more crime. And we've had a pretty good economy. Even though we went into recession in 2008, we've been steadily climbing out of it since 2008 with under President Obama. And now President Trump, of course, taking full credit for all that, which I find just fascinating. Look at the economy, it's fabulous. He's right, it is fabulous, but it's been increasing ever since 2008. So, and it actually was doing better under Obama. We won't go into that. That's a political question. The rate of violent crime is still relatively high despite recent decreases. 17 out of every 1,000 residents aged 12 or older living in an urban area were victimized by violent crime in 2009. And that's a lot. That's a lot of violent crime. But at the same time, it's less than it has been. And it has to do with urban areas. The more crowded it is, the more likely there's going to be crime. So here it's really kind of hard for people to find anybody to rob or whatever, I guess.
Do you think that human trafficking has increased since?
It actually increased, and it's a continuing problem in the United States. It's especially a problem in the Midwest. I've read what they said about Indian country, how it's really horrible in Indian country. But the reality is it's worse in urban areas like Chicago, in areas like small towns in Iowa and Illinois, it's pretty bad. Here it's not nearly as bad. However, up in Canada, it's god-awful.
It's awful?
It's awful. And over half of the people being trafficked up in Canada are native, First Nation people.
How about in Mexico? Do we do that with that?
You know, I'm not exactly sure what's going on in Mexico, but and I've read what they said about Indian country, how bad it is in Indian country, but it's much worse up in Canada, which doesn't mean that it's okay here. It just means that it's not as bad as in other areas of the country. Okay. Any trafficking is bad. There is the Republicans have an attack ad about the lady that's running for Senate, the Democrat that's running for Senate. And they said that she's weak on human trafficking, which isn't true at all. Well, you know, that's politics. We won't go into that. But she's written laws. She's always voted to strengthen the laws, trying to control traffic. In 2002, John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo terrorized the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. They shot 13 random people, killing 10 of these individuals. They were active for 3 months, and they terrorized the entire area. I left Washington, D.C. in 2001. And here in 2002, this whole thing started, as interesting as that is. I was living in Lubbock, Texas. And the year after I left Lubbock, Texas, they had a huge tornado that killed like 157 people. I was living in Oklahoma City. I worked there for 4 years, from 1990 until 1994. Then we went to Japan. And the year that I went to Japan, they had they blew up the Murrah building in Oklahoma City. I had just come back to the States. So every time I leave someplace, something horrible happens.
Well, don't leave. Wait till I leave. Just kidding.
I don't know what it is. It has something to do with me, but I haven't quite figured it out.
Your Yanny powers, probably. Just kidding.
I have all this positive energy around me, and when I leave, the positive energy is gone. Anyway, they killed lots of people. They killed 10 people. They were spooking everybody. And of course, I had just left that area of Washington, D.C. And the gas station where I used to fill up with gasoline, they shot somebody at that gas station. I know.
What was the reason?
None. None. They actually captured them. The kid was only 13 years old when he first started sniping.
Wait, wasn't the guy like angry towards like the government or something?
Right, yeah, he had been military, and that's where he had learned how to shoot. And he was angry toward the government. What does that have to do with a 13-year-old? I don't know what that has to do with a 13-year-old. But we have them. We've captured these individuals, so we can actually question these two guys. 2004, Charles Allen McCoy Jr. began sniping at cars passing by on the interstate. He was dubbed the Ohio Highway Sniper. McCoy killed one woman and terrorized many people driving on the Ohio interstates. He would shoot through their windshields. And of course, sometimes you can't see, so he couldn't really target them very well. But of course, he could shoot. He shot the steering wheel. He could see the steering wheel, so he shot behind the steering wheel. That's what he was trying to do. Anyway, why did he do it? Well, we captured him too, and we're also not exactly sure why he did it. Although the number of serious violent offenses committed by persons ages 12 to 17 declined by 61% from 1993 to 2005, juveniles continue to be responsible for committing about 24% of the violent crimes. So who are the most dangerous people out there? Well, kids are, strangely enough, teenage boys between the ages of 12 and 17. Youths under 18 years old commit approximately 12% of sexual assaults, 18% of robberies, 22% of aggravated assaults, and 8% of all homicides. So, something to think about. In 1999-2000, 71% of the students in public schools reported experiencing one or more violent incidents, and 20% reported serious violent incidents, which included rape, sexual battery other than rape, a physical fight with a weapon, a robbery, and robbery with or without a weapon. So there were all of these negative things happening in public schools. Why don't we talk about private schools? Or should we talk about private schools? What's going on in private schools? Who goes to private schools? Now who goes to public school? Everybody goes, don't they? Who goes to private school?
Wealthy class.
I'm sorry?
Wealthy.
Or whoever you want to let in, right? So in public school, what happens if you do something bad? Where do you go? You go back to school. Where else are you going to go to school, right? But if you go to a private school and you do something bad, what happens to you? They kick you out and you go to public school, exactly. I was working in a high school, or a junior high school in Oklahoma City. And this was the school where they sent all the kids that had gotten into trouble at any of the other places. So these kids would come to this school. So we had all the bad kids, which was kind of fun. Or could have been fun. It wasn't that bad. You'd think it'd be horrible, but it wasn't really that bad. Strangely, this is in Oklahoma City, and there is a racist element to Oklahoma City. Most of the kids were either Hispanic or African American. Very few white kids. Of course, most of the people in the area were white. So why in the world were all the bad kids Hispanic and African American? Well, when somebody who's Hispanic or African American did something bad, then they immediately tagged them as bad people. So then they sent them to Crooked Oak. That's where I was working. I know Crooked Oak. It sounds like a place for criminals, doesn't it? And that's exactly what they did. So when the white kids did something bad, what happened to them? Well, they didn't tag them as anything negative, and they didn't actually send them to Crooked Oak. That's what was going on. Only about 36% of these schools reported one or more of these incidents to the police, and this is a problem as well because they don't want the kid to get into trouble. They don't want to tag them as a criminal. They're not even telling people about the rapes. They're not even telling the police about the rapes, the fights, the weapons that they've seen. Most schools, most states, if you have a gun at school, then you're immediately suspended from school, and you can't come back for a year. At least that's the way it was. That's the way it is in Iowa. That's the way it was in Oklahoma when I worked at Crooked Oak. We had a kid. Well, I think I told you the story of the kid that came to my room and stuck a .25 caliber pistol in my chest and pulled the trigger. I told you about that kid, didn't I? Yeah. So here, okay. This kid had a problem. His mother was the first. He was the first crack baby in Oklahoma. I know. So that was. Everybody's celebrating the first crack baby. We got the first crack baby. His mother was a stripper downtown, and she had this kid he was about 13 years old. This was junior high school. He was in my class, and I was the only one that would deal with this kid. Most of the other teachers just kind of threw him off in the corner and didn't ever talk to him, and he liked me. He liked me a lot because I was the only one that would interact with him. So during lunch, we locked our doors at lunch for some reason, and then we ate our lunch, and then there were teachers outside taking care of all the kids during lunch period. But I would let him in my office, and he would come in, and we'd have conversations about things. And he liked me a lot. So one day, he stole his brother's pistol, this automatic pistol. He stole it and brought it to school. None of the kids liked it because he had all kinds of really horrible problems, ADHD, and he was bullied. I mean, he just had all kinds of interesting problems. So none of the kids liked him. So he came to school with his brother's .25 caliber pistol, which is a really odd caliber of pistol, 22, 38, but not 25. You know, this is a really strange pistol. So, but it was an automatic. So through the day, he would show the pistol to some of the other kids. And when he did, he'd say, "You want a bullet?" And he would pull out what you call it, and he would take a bullet out and he would hand it to the kid, and he'd jam the thing back in there. And of course, if he didn't cock it, he wasn't putting a bullet in the chamber. But a bullet was up there. And he did this all day long, and then right at the end of the day, he came to my office, came to my classroom, and he knocked on the door, and of course my door was unlocked, so it didn't make any sense that he was knocking on the door. So I opened the door, and he immediately stuck the pistol in my chest and pulled the trigger. Well, what had happened, he'd given away so many of the bullets, and he jammed that thing up there so many times that the bullet that was in the chamber got crooked. And so when he pulled the trigger, it was crooked, and the firing pin didn't hit the bullet right. Luckily, that's what happened. But he's standing there pulling the trigger. Of course, you only pull it one time because it could only pull one time. And there was another teacher that was walking past. It was a basketball coach. He's like 6'7". And he reached over this kid, he grabbed the gun off of my chest, and he yanked it. And when he did that, he broke the kid's finger. But, and of course, he screamed, "The guy's killing me, the guy's killing me." Anyway, but I didn't die, okay? In case you guys were wondering whether I got shot or not. You know I didn't get shot. But it was fairly traumatic. The strange thing was that he stuck the gun in my chest and he pulled the trigger, and I didn't react at all. I didn't do anything. I just kind of stood there. And I really didn't understand what was going on. I didn't believe it was a real gun, for one. The kids knew that I was a Vietnam vet, and so a lot of them tried to spook me from time to time. And so that I just assumed it was another situation like that. They would come to my door, and they'd open the door, and they'd throw a firecracker in it. You know, stupid stuff like that. Just ignorant, mean, bullying type behavior. Anyway, I left pretty soon after that. I just thought it wasn't worth all the trauma that I was going through. But he was kicked out of school. He was kicked out of school for a year, suspended for a year, because he had a gun at school. Not because he tried to kill somebody, but because he had a gun at school. I guess we're lucky he didn't try to shoot somebody else. One of the students, you know, okay. Just wanted to kill his favorite teacher, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So let's talk about some school shootings. In February 2009, an 8th grader named Lawrence King was shot in the head and died while sitting in his classroom in Oxnard, California. His classmates were horrified, of course. Well, a gunshot to the head, not a pretty sight. Police alleged that the shooter was a 14-year-old by the name of Brandon McInerney, who had previously taunted King because he was gay. At the time, King was living in a shelter for abused and troubled children, and of course, then he was shot in the head and killed. 2006, Warren Mesner and 3 other boys beat a homeless man to death in Daytona Beach, Florida, because they were bored. What else do you have to do? Let's just beat this guy to death. The boys jumped up and down on the guy's chest and crushed his rib cage, and that's what killed him. They were sentenced to 22 to 35 years in prison, even though they were minors. Klebold and Harris, Columbine High School, April of 1999. They decided that they were going to punish the people that had bullied them. So they armed themselves with several weapons, but they also had bombs. They had bombs at their house. They had bombs at the school, and they killed 12 of their classmates. And the reason they killed so many people, and this is the first time we ever realized that this was taking place, but the reason they killed so many people was because they made headshots. They shot people in the head. And this is the first time the FBI realized what was going on. That some of these video games teach you to make headshots, to aim at the head. Because it's the easiest, it's the best way to kill somebody, is by shooting them in the head. Shoot them in the torso, you might miss whatever it is you're aiming for. Your heart's about the size of your fist, it's behind your rib cage. If you miss it, then all you've done is punch a hole in somebody's lung, and they're not dead. You can shoot somebody in the liver, you can shoot somebody in the pancreas, shoot somebody in the stomach. Usually that doesn't kill them, but if you shoot somebody in the head, that usually kills them. And that's what happened here. And this is the first time the FBI ever realized that that these individuals were being trained by video games to make headshots. And of course, the video games that they were playing had to do with zombies. And zombies, of course, you have to shoot them in the head to kill them. Everybody knows that. How are you going to kill a zombie? Shoot them in the head. Shoot them anyplace else, it doesn't kill them. Right? Their heart's not beating anyway. but if you shoot him in the head, then that kills him. I've seen the movie. Okay. you got to shoot him in the head. Anyway, this is the first time the FBI realized that. The FBI had been training people. They don't train you in the military to shoot people in the head. They train you to shoot them in the torso. And if you shoot them in the torso, that usually stops them. It may not kill them, but it will stop them. So that was what that's the way they train people. The only people that they were training to shoot in, other individuals in the head were snipers, because it's a kill shot. And they were training them these kids were making headshots, and that's why they killed so many people. And as we start talking about school shootings, in the future, after 1999, this is what we were learning, that these kids were being trained by video games to make headshots. 17% of high school students had carried a weapon, a gun, a knife, or a club, at least once in the previous month, and about 6% of these students carried the weapon to school. My sister worked at a high school in Chicago, and they had one of those metal detectors. And her job was to, if the metal detector went off for a female, then she was supposed to warn the child and make sure she didn't have a weapon. Because what had been happening, at first they were only having the boys walk through the metal detector. And the males were giving their weapons to the females, and then the females, of course, were carrying it around the metal detector, and then they were getting their weapons later on. So they started having the girls go through the metal detectors. They were finding all kinds of interesting knives, shivs. If you know what a shiv is a makeshift knife that they will sharpen out of just about anything, even plastic. You can kill somebody with a plastic spoon. But they were finding all of these things on these young ladies, and of course they were starting to have female gang violence in Chicago, and that was one of the jobs that my sister did. It was a horrible job, as you can imagine. But her job was to check out females that had kicked off the metal detector, and of course you can imagine the things that they said to her. They called her all kinds of a lesbian, because here she was finding out, patting girls down and making sure that they didn't have weapons. So it was not a fun job, but I guess she made enough money. She didn't quit. In 2005-2006 school year, 17% of public schools experienced at least one serious violent incident at school. Why do we just talk about public schools? We know that private schools, yes, they can kick those kids out, but why don't we even include the private schools in any of these statistics? What's going on with private schools?
Do they control their data? Who gets access to it?
Or if they have data at all.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, public schools have to give the data out. They are tasked by the state.
Funding.
It has to do with funding. If it's federal funding, then they have to do what the federal government tells them to do. But if it's private, they don't have to do anything at all. This is one of the reasons why we've had colleges in the United States that would not allow gays to go to their school, or not allow African Americans to go to their school. If it's a private school, they don't take any public funding. If they don't take any federal funding or state funding, they don't have to follow state laws or federal laws. They can do anything that they want. And there have been colleges in the United States that would not admit African Americans. Bob Jones University in South Carolina is a good example. They didn't admit their first African American until the 21st century. And they could do that because they didn't take any federal funding. I went to a college that had, well, actually, when I went to Wabash College, there were any number of schools that didn't admit females. Notre Dame didn't admit females. None of the academies admitted females. Princeton, Yale, Harvard, none of these had any females. But Wabash to this day still doesn't admit females. And how can it do that? Well, the way it does that is that it doesn't accept any federal funding. They are privately endowed, as it were. So they can do anything that they want. Of course, they do have African Americans. They've had African Americans since just before the Civil War. So that's not an issue as far as they're concerned. But it was a tradition that they don't admit females, as ugly as that may be. It's one of 2 schools in the country that don't admit females. The other one is Hampton-Sydney in Virginia. So, 2 private schools. Anyway, so what are we talking about here? Smaller percentage of primary schools, 67%. Then middle schools, 94%, or high schools, 95%. Experienced a violent incident in 2005, 2006. As you can see, even private primary schools. There was a school in Montana, just outside of Billings, where a young lady brought a pistol to school. And it was like a .38 caliber, long-barreled pistol. I mean, it was huge. It was like a cannon. And this little girl hid it in the sandbox. She was like a 3rd grader, but people were picking on her because she was overweight, and she was going to get back at those boys. It's always the boys. She was going to get back at the boys that were picking on her, and she grabbed that gun out of the sandbox and started pulling the trigger. Well, it misfired the first time that she had somebody in her sights, and when they saw the gun, everybody scattered. So the second time she pulled the trigger, it was a revolver. The second time she pulled the trigger, it actually fired. But by this time, everybody had scattered. So she didn't actually shoot anybody, but here she was. She had a gun at school, and she was a 3rd grader, and it was a big gun too. Yeah, and when it fired, of course, it kicked. Yeah, just knocked her right over. Anyway, she didn't kill anybody, thank goodness. But as you can see, even primary schools have violence. Middle schools and high schools, lots and lots of violence, unfortunately, and all of them. But only the ones that we get statistics about, and the ones that we get statistics about are public schools, not private schools. February 14th, 2008, Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, Illinois, which is just south of Chicago. Stephen Kazmarek opened fire with a shotgun and 3 pistols in a crowd of students on campus, killing 5 students and injuring an additional 17 people. One of the individuals that he killed, one of the individuals that he wounded was the teacher that tried to control the situation. He was like 67 years old, had all kinds of interesting medical problems, and here the kid threw him off and shot him. Shot him in the stomach, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And then he shot himself, of course. But that's what he looks like. You can see how happy the kid was. This is right after the shooting, of course. On the Red Lake Indian Reservation in Red Lake, Minnesota, 16-year-old Jeffrey Wise killed his grandfather. His grandfather was a tribal police officer. He killed his grandfather's girlfriend in their home. He then stole all of his grandfather's police material, a vest and his pistol. He drove to Red Lake High School in the police vehicle, and then he opened fire on the population at the high school. He killed seven individuals. 2 of them were teachers, and 5 of them were students, and he wounded 5 others. You wonder why he killed more than he wounded, and it's because he made headshots. He shot him in the head. He killed 7 people and wounded 5. And this is on the Ojibwe Reservation up in Red Lake, Minnesota. If anybody ever been to Red Lake? It's way up north, way up north.
Didn't know I know now.
What? That's farther south.
That's further south, yeah.
Red Lake. April 16, 2007, on the campus of Virginia Tech University in Blacksburg, Virginia, Sung Hui Cho, a South Korean immigrant of 15 years and a senior at Virginia Tech, shot and killed 32 people and wounded 17 others in 2 separate attacks. So he made an attack on the dormitory, and he killed a select number of individuals, shot a select number of individuals, and then he was able to walk across campus, almost completely across campus, and go into a classroom and just start randomly shooting people in the classroom. It changed everything because now on most campuses they have a warning system. And that's what happened. They knew that something had happened, but they had no way of warning all the students in the school. And now I think if something happens here, well, isn't there an alert that comes onto your telephone? Right? If something bad happens, don't
Is
you
it
get
at
an
public
alert?
school? Just
Not
public
here?
school, not here.
Not here at the college.
Oh, really?
No.
It's kind of a small campus.
Was that shooting in Chinle or something? Or
Yeah.
a threat? We all got like an email and just an email and text.
So who emailed you? The school?
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Or was it security here that emailed you about the shooting in Chinle?
Well, I got a text message on my phone from the Chinle School District about that, informing us of those things. They usually do text messages too when they're doing lockdowns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, then I announced it on the radio.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you were on the radio at the time.
Yeah. So usually when I get those messages, I usually forward it out.
So why do you get the messages?
Because I sign up for it at the beginning of the school year, when
Ah.
you're signing your child's application, it said, I will ask you on there if you want to receive alerts and messages from the school.
But your kids don't go to Chinle?
My daughter does.
Your daughter does,
Yeah, they're
okay.
both a part of Chinle School District.
Okay,
One
all right.
here in Saley, one in Chinle.
Okay. Just curious. Okay.
And I saw recently too, Cell One, they're doing emergency alerts for weather, Amber Alerts and stuff like that, so you do have to register for that as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it just depends on if you do register and you make your phone number known
Okay.
to those entities that do give out those
Then all of a
alerts.
sudden you get all this information. Well, they didn't have that at Virginia Tech, which is out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know if you've ever been to Blackburn. It's out in the middle of the Blue Ridge Mountains. There's like nothing around Blackburn. It's really kind of interesting. Which may be one of the reasons why this guy was able to do what he did. Anyway, killed a lot of people, unfortunately. This is one of the reasons why we are trained to deal with school shooters. What do? How would we secure this room? Can we secure this room?
Yeah, the door's kind of
Okay,
set
the
in
door
there, so.
goes out. Okay, pulls out, right?
Yeah,
So how could we secure it?
we have to put all our belts together and.
Well, you could tie the doorknob to something
Heavy.
that he couldn't pull
Yeah.
in, like a table. You
Yeah.
could jam a table in there, and then tie the
Can't remember.
doorknob
Just kidding.
to the table, and then he couldn't open the door. Is there a glass window in the door? You could shoot through the
I
glass
think there
window.
is.
Yeah.
There is.
But I think I'm not going to be looking through the window to see if he's there. Yep, there's a glass window, but of course, he can only see this portion. If we were over here and we had the door secured so we couldn't get through, would that work?
Relatively, yeah.
So we could actually keep him from getting in, right? Or her, whichever the case may be. It's probably somebody that's white. It's also a male. White people in the league are seem to shoot like everybody, right? I didn't make that up. I just see it on the news all the time. Okay, so we can't secure this door. We can't secure this room. He could shoot through the window, but of course we could all be in this portion of the room, and he wouldn't see us at all, right? If he came into the room, we could throw things at him. We could throw change in his face. And if you throw change at somebody, if you throw coins at them, they can't see it coming toward them because it's coming toward them like this. And it hit him in the face and he would have no idea what it was. I know, it's just a thought. I know, I had this brilliant idea once upon a time.
That's why I have my change in here.
There you go. The hand grenade. Take it out of the hand grenade, Bill, and
Just don't swing the grenade.
and throw it in their face, and he won't be able to see it. It's like invisible things hitting him in the face, and he wouldn't be able to tell what they were. So potentially, if he even got in the room, we could drive him away if we threw things in his face. And if we were lucky enough, we'd hit him in the eyes, so he couldn't see anymore. I know. I think we're okay. I think we're going to be all right. For one thing, we can secure the door so he can't get in. And then if he does get in, we can throw things in his face.
Scary.
People with a good arm. Who's got a good arm? A good throwing arm?
Francis.
All the men in here.
Is that right? Pitcher? You're not a pitcher? Okay. I was a center fielder, so I'd probably throw way up there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I play center.
I don't feel so.
Common characteristics identified in boys responsible for school ground shootings. More than usual experience with firearms, showing a persistent fascination with guns. Fascination with guns. Okay. But would they even have to have a fascination with real weapons? Could it be video games where they learn to shoot with... Isn't that what Leonard said? He took Penny to the shooting range, and she said, "Do you want me to show you how to load the gun?" And he said, "You don't have to. I play Grand Theft Auto or something. I know how to handle a gat," is what he said, which was a joke. I know it's kind of funny and kind of stupid. But potentially, if you have a fascination for these things, you think guns are really important. I guess this is one of the fascinations has to do with these individuals that might be school shooters. Isolation, rejection, or torment by classmates. This is really huge. Why are they so pissed off, and why are they willing to kill people? Of course, they're learning to kill people, potentially from whatever literature they're reading or the video games they're playing. But why are they so upset with people? Why are they willing to kill individuals? It may be because they're isolated, they're rejected, or they're tormented by their classmates. So they're being bullied in a lot of different ways, in several different ways. They may have problems relating to girls.
Yeah.
These individuals are rejected, they're rejected, isolated, and tormented by their classmates, but that it may be the male population. The female population isn't paying any attention to them at all. How tragic would that be?
That's sad.
It is sad, but I mean, we're not going to just like pair people up when they're in the first grade so that they won't become school shooters. That doesn't make any sense.
It's going to be later on.
Here, hold hands.
That is actually what you do.
Walk around the track holding hands in the sun. Preoccupation with various forms of graphically violent media, including music, internet sites, and video games, of course. And so this is how we can recognize these select individuals. But out of 100 of these guys, only one of them is going to become a school shooter. The shooter in Parkland had a fascination for weapons. Yeah. You know all about the Parkland shooter. Go ahead, give us his profile. Tell us about the Parkland shooter.
We actually didn't go too in-depth with the Parkland shooter, but yeah, he did have a big fascination with guns.
Yeah.
And like all his social media accounts, he definitely, like that's what, you know, the predominant
Right.
theme was.
Right.
Yeah.
Was weaponry. Exactly. And he was a perfect example of this individual. He was rejected by his classmates. He didn't have a girlfriend. He was kind of slender. What about the shooter in another Florida, Jacksonville, at the video tournament? John Madden football tournament. Shot and killed 2 people, wounded 5. Well, what was he like? Well, once again, we've got this fascination with the media. It's violent to the extent that it's football, but I mean, it's not shooting. It's not people shooting each other. But potentially we've got the same situation. We've got a whole tournament full of individuals that are rejected nerds. And why do they play so many video games? Because they ain't going out and having dates, that's why. So all of these guys, we got a bunch of nerds there, and so potentially we've got exactly the same situation. I'm not saying anything negative about nerds. I was a nerd when I was in high school, and I didn't shoot hardly anybody. I was only shot, and I was only shot once. And it was by my neighbor who had a fascination for guns, so yeah, that was kind of weird. Shot me in the hip with a .22 short from about a half mile away.
Okay, I was just saying, as long as it wasn't close.
No.
Why?
Shot me.
Why?
He claimed that he thought I was a deer. He was going to kill him with a 22. So I was cutting wood in the woods, and I was kind of behind a bunch of trees. I didn't have brown clothes on. I don't know why I thought I was a deer.
Were you dressed in
I had
beige?
on blue. I was dressed just like, I had on blue jeans, and I had on a white T-shirt.
Oh boy.
I had on a purple, a maroon sweatshirt, the kind that zip up the front. Purple, blue, and white. Yeah, that sounds like a deer to me. And he shot me in the hip. Luckily, he didn't shoot me in the head or shoot me in the chest. He shot me in the pelvis. He shot me down here. And it bounced off my pelvis. But he was about a half mile away. He was up on top of the hill.
Oh, you got
So he could see
stabbed.
down.
Yeah, shooting down. But yeah, the bullet ricocheted. It hit my hip bone, and then it ricocheted off another angle of my hip, and it almost came out. So when I showed it to my mother, she's a nurse. She just went, "Oh, that's not bad," and she just kind of filled it out. She just plucked it right out.
How old were you?
13, 14. He was 15 or 16.
Oh my God.
It was the kind of rifle. I don't know if you probably have never seen these 22s. It was a single shot 22 rifle, and it broke down,
Yeah.
looked like a shotgun does. Then you put the shell in there. Yeah. Luckily, it was a 22 short. It wasn't a hollow point. It wasn't a 22 long. It was a 22 short. So it's almost like a BB or something.
Yeah. Mosquito bite.
A mosquito bite. It made a hole about this big, and it came out, and the hole was about that big too. So it didn't explode. It didn't expand. It was a solid shot, just a 22 short. Okay, so how can we fix schools? Well, one thing that we could do, we could require school uniforms. Gangs, of course, will wear their colors at school. People get angry because of the shoes. Some people have really expensive shoes, so you can show your wealth or your poverty by the clothes that you wear. Well, if you use school uniforms, of course, that takes all of that out of the equation. I mean, we've seen the movies where the individuals were picking on other individuals because of their clothes. So yeah, we can cure that situation by requiring school uniforms. We can beef up security measures. Of course, after the Parkland shooting, this was the second in a month. Wasn't that what it was? They had all these school shootings right at the end of the year last year. I mean, it was really horrible. People were going, what do we do? What do we do? How do we protect our kids in their schools? They came up with all kinds of interesting answers. Of course, there were a lot of people, including the kids at Parkland, they want to take away assault weapons. They want assault weapons, people to take them off the street. That's what they want to happen. But of course, the Second Amendment people don't want that to happen. The conservatives are saying something totally different. Well, I know, let's arm the teachers. Well, I know Travis doesn't want me to have a gun because, well, I don't think he trusts me, and you're right. You don't want to give a white guy a gun, okay? So that's one of the things that they want to arm the teachers. Another thing that they want them to do is to allow the kids to bring weapons to school. So if somebody starts shooting at them, they can shoot back. That doesn't make any sense. No, it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, okay, so it's kind of up in the air as to what's going to happen next. Nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. So then we had all those shootings at the end of last year, and we assumed that something would happen by the beginning of this year. Everybody forgot it over the summer. And so I don't know what's going to happen next. Anyway, so you can beef up security measures. Right now, most security organizations that work at schools are not armed. They have tasers, but they don't have pistols. Passing tougher gun laws, that's what the kids want to happen. They want to take assault weapons off the streets. I don't know how much sense it makes to you to have military weapons in the hands of civilians, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I was in the military and I was trained to use a weapon, but I don't think just everybody should have an AR-15. I'm sorry, the damn thing shoots too many bullets that rip people apart. I've seen people die from a wound that just barely hit their shoulder. They bled to death from a AK-47, the assault rifle that the Russians use. I saw a guy that got shot in the shoulder and he bled to death because you've got arteries right there in your shoulder. Anyway, bled to death. Not important. Passing tougher gun laws, offering violence prevention programs, restricting access to violent movies. So maybe we shouldn't let the young kids go to violent movies. Maybe we should start cracking down. Wait a minute, there's too much blood and gore in this movie. You can't, all you guys think you're Freddy Krueger. That can't happen anymore. We're not going to let you go to that movie. Profiling to predict which students are likely to commit violent crimes. And as I said, we could do that. We could profile these kids. But out of every 100 kids, you're only going to get one shooter. So we're stigmatizing the other kids. You're acting too goth. Your clothes are too dark. You're wearing the wrong fingernail polish. You're wearing black fingernail polish. Does anybody have black fingernail polish? Am I insulting you? Are you okay? Did I insult you? Okay, good. Nobody has fingernail polish on. Okay. They're wearing the wrong lipstick. They're males and they're wearing eyeliner with eyeshadow or something. Well, we create this profile of what these individuals are supposed to look like. They're wearing fatigues to school. They're wearing combat fatigues to school. Well, that's not good. They're wearing a bulletproof vest to school.
I think they're boots.
What?
Or fatigues.
What?
Fatigues or fatigues. What did you say?
Fatigue?
Are those boots?
No, I'm
the
talking about the
camouflage.
camouflage.
Oh, okay.
It's, yeah.
BDUs, what they in the military they call BDUs. Actually, if you look at what the military is wearing today, they don't look anything like the fatigues of the past, the BDUs of the past. Yeah, they're all have pixels on them and all kinds of funny stuff. Like I said, I was with the military all summer, so.
They break up the line more, isn't that why?
Theoretically, yeah, but see, the Navy's wearing one color, and the Marines have a different, a different thing, and then the Army, the Army and the Marines should be wearing the same thing, but they're not. So you can tell the
One
difference.
wears tan, one wears coyote tan. There's a coyote tan.
No, even the configuration on their uniforms are completely different. Air Force is wearing blue and white. Yeah, it's blue and gray actually. The Navy is wearing gray and gray or something. Anyway, it's weird. It's really weird. And combat boots. Is it okay to wear combat boots? Does everybody have combat boots on?
I wore mine yesterday.
Did you wear yours yesterday? It's a good thing I didn't piss you off yesterday. Okay.
That was a good mood, relatively good mood yesterday.
Increasing communication between students and school administrators. People that know that this person is that angry are usually their friends. But they don't want to say anything because they don't want to embarrass the individual. They don't think that it's going to happen. I don't know what their problem is. But people don't want to get involved. It's just the way it works. Anyway, that's some of the ways that we can combat school violence, is by putting everybody in the same uniform. The most prevalent problem with aggression in education settings is bullying, of course, especially in grade school, middle school, and high school. However, on college campuses, we don't know each other well enough to bully. The biggest problem we have on college campuses, of course, is date rape and hazing. Hazing has to do with fraternities, and they will, in order to get into the fraternity, you have to go through various hazing things. And one of them tends to be drinking. You have to be able to drink tequila or something, which tastes like crap, or kerosene. My favorite flavor. Kerosene, oh boy. This is great. Here, drink this whole bottle. Sure. And these kids, of course, they're only 18 or 19 years old. They've only been drinking for a couple of years. And here they are trying to down this bottle of tequila. They poison themselves and then they die. There's nothing sadder than watching somebody die from alcohol poisoning. And the reason it's so sad is because there's nothing you can do. You can't slow it down. It gets in. Once it gets into your stomach, you can pump the stomach, but it has already started getting into your bloodstream, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. No matter what you've done to that kid, you can stick an IV in the kid and try to dilute out his blood. It's not going to work. They just die. It's really sad. Alcohol stays in your system for a long, well, for about 45 minutes. It stays in your system.
That is a long time.
But it gets,
I'm all like,
well, I mean, when you're trying
what's
to,
wrong? 3 months.
here's the problem. We're trying to save this kid's life, and his blood alcohol just keeps increasing. And it's in his blood, and there's nothing we can do. And it's in the lining of his stomach, and we can't flush it out of his stomach. And it's in his small intestines, and there's nothing we can do about the small intestines. And he dies because it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And we've done everything that we can to try to save him, but he's dead. We might as well just throw him in the corner and let him die, but we can't do that. We have to work on him, and of course, for 45 minutes you're working on him, and then he dies anyway. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's just a really, really sad situation. Saddest type of individual. Well, the saddest person coming in is the kid that's been abused by their parents and is near death. They got a concussion or a split skull or whatever. That's the saddest situation. But this is really sad. These kids are only 18, 19 years old. We had one of these at my college, at Wabash College, and it was a fraternity hazing. And they closed the fraternity down. It's still closed. And that was about 12 years ago. The guy drank himself to death from drinking too much tequila. Sad situation. Okay, but date rape, of course, is worse. Date rape is really an ugly, ugly situation. Because this is somebody that you know, this is somebody that you trust, you go out on a date with them, they get you drunk, and the next thing you know is that you've been sexually molested. And you don't want to turn them in because they're your friends, and maybe they're your boyfriend, but probably not, So you've got this really strange thing going through your head that, well, maybe he loves me, and that's the reason. No, that can't be it. Well, you know how silly people are. Anyway, so date rape, I mean, it's really a serious situation. Much of this aggression is unreported, and hence it's underestimated by official records. One of the things that happens on every school campus, they have to talk about how much violence there is on the campus. They have to report that to the federal government. So every campus gets a report, and they have to publish that report as to how safe that campus is. How many rapes are there on campus? Are there any physical assaults? Are there any robberies on campus? How safe is your campus? And one of the reasons they put up all those warning things so that you can push the button and you've got a security guy there, theoretically, right away, armed with a flashlight. I'm blind, I can't see.
They do a report on Tenet College, but they leave out the rape reports. They report everything else, but the rape reports aren't on there, and neither are the suicides.
Which are the two most important things on the report?
Which is the two, that we need to know.
Sure. How safe is this campus? How secure is the administration making the campus? That's really important as to whether you're going to send your kid here, your 18-year-old daughter, your fragile 19-year-old son. Are you going to send him to this campus? Do they support, or will they support him if he gets depressed? Will anybody pay attention to him if he gets depressed? Of course, we're going to pay attention to him in this classroom, but not everybody takes this class. And when I was working at Ashford, I think I told you the story. When I was working at Ashford, we had a kid that committed suicide. And he wasn't in my class, but he was in one of my colleagues' classes. And of course, we're both psychologists. So we should be noticing these things. I mean, that's our job. That's what we're trained to do, is to notice people and to look in their faces and tell what they're thinking. But he refused to do that. And it happened over and over and over again. Finally, the kid committed suicide. But he had other students that were relatively fragile. And that he was pushing them to the edge because he was kind of a mean teacher. He did all the time stuff and everything. And so he was just kind of pushing his students to the edge. And eventually the one kid committed suicide, but he had other fragile students that I warned him about, that he needed to do something about. And he refused to do it because of the rigor. That was his excuse. He needed to make sure that the class was tough enough so that we could, when we sent these kids away to graduate school, that they'd be able to handle it. So he thought he was a DI in the military, so he was going to make him as tough as he possibly could. Anyway, and finally the kid committed suicide. I could have punched him. My colleague, I mean, not the kid who committed suicide. But he wasn't in my class. But if he had been in my class, I could have recognized the fact that he was that fragile, that he was in that situation. Anyway, I didn't get the opportunity. So we need teachers that actually care about their students, that actually look at their students, that actually listen to their students, so that potentially, of course, they will detect this and be able to handle it if a situation like that comes up. That's what we need, is people to pay attention to their students. There are two different types of teachers. We have extroverts and introverts. An introvert is an individual that is mostly focused inside, but when they teach, they have to project themselves. And since they have to project themselves, it's easier for them to see their students. An extrovert doesn't pay any attention to their students. I don't know if you ever had a teacher like that. They didn't pay any attention to you. They had no idea who you were. They never talked to you. The most important thing to them was their ego. Anyway, those are the individuals that have a problem noticing their students. And that's what happened with my colleague. He was an extrovert. He only cared about himself. He wanted to make himself look good. He didn't care about his students. Really irritated him. And he quit. He quit the year before Ashford closed. Most of those who make implied or direct threats will not commit serious violence. The reality is, so if we start identifying these individuals as dangerous, the reality is most of them won't do anything. Most of their violence is either talk or it's not something that they will follow through on. So how do you tell if they're going to follow through or not? That's the question. How do you tell? The louder they are, the less likely that they will follow through. And one of the reasons that they are so loud is because they are,
already getting it out.
They're getting it out, and it's already dissipating.
Yeah.
It's out. But if it's the quiet person that is the one that becomes the shooter. If you've got a bloviating bully, this is not an individual that's ever going to pick up a gun and shoot.
Be able the rest of the time.
It's the quiet guy that sits in the corner. No offense, Tyrone. I know you sit in the corner all the time. But it's the quiet guy that he just keeps accumulating offenses. Like here, I'm picking on Tyrone again. He may come up behind me and pop me in the back of the head or something. Okay, because he's the quiet guy sitting in the corner. But Travis, I pick on him all the time. No, Travis isn't probably going to be the shooter. or the hitter, or whatever. Please don't hit me, okay? Threatening communications are made for many reasons. Anger, disputes, fear, jealousy, and ideology. And of course, the more vocal it is, the less likely it's going to turn into violence. It is just verbal. And they're dissipating. They're dissipating their anger. I'm going to talk about swearing now. And I've talked about swearing, not in this class, of course, but with some of my colleagues. A lot of people don't like it when people swear. They use the F word, they use the S word, or whatever. But the reality is that swearing actually dissipates your anger. And that's one of the reasons, even though I know your mother's going to wash your mouth out with soap, that's one of the reasons why in a combat situation with military personnel, the F word is very popular. It's a scary, scary situation. And the more you use that word, the less likely you are, the more likely you are to respond correctly to the situation. You're less likely to be scared. Can you accept that?
Yes.
That makes sense over here. Are you okay with that? Okay. So it dissipates your anger. It allows you to respond correctly to a situation. The swearing does. And we hear this in the police, we hear this in the fire department. We especially hear it in the military. It's like the most popular word in the military. It's not because they're trying to identify this pencil as something that has had sexual intercourse. That's not what they're trying to do. What they're trying to do is they're trying to control their emotions so that they can react correctly. Okay? So, that being said, remember, we've got an individual that is accumulating anger within themselves. And if he's a vocal displayer of anger, he's less likely to actually physically attack somebody. Does that make sense? Okay, so it is Tyrone that is the danger. He's the one in the corner accumulating all these attacks that I have against him.
They won't do nothing.
Zero tolerance policies are both ineffective and have the potential to stigmatize and harm mistakenly identified individuals, and that's one of the reasons why zero tolerance policies don't work very well. Of course, they use this in urban settings. Various police departments will have zero tolerance policies. These tend not to work. What they tend to do is arrest too many minorities. They arrest people that show them disrespect or something, and that's what their zero tolerance is. Threat assessment is very similar. It holds more promise, however. It involves carefully considering the nature of the threat, the risk posed by the individual, and the needed response to reduce the risk of harmful action. And this is known as threat assessment. And this is what you guys were doing over the summer. You were trying to create a profile for these individuals, that might potentially strike out against a community or a school or whatever. You were actually doing threat assessment. You were creating profiles. And of course they were giving you profiles at the same time, and you were accumulating all this information and trying to create new ideas about who we should identify as a danger. The individual in just north of San Antonio, the Air Force, the ex-Air Force guy that went into the church and shot everybody, shot so many people. Why didn't we recognize him as a problem? The Air Force recognized him as a problem, and that's why they kicked him out of the service, because they saw him as a problem. The other problem was they didn't tell anybody about it. They sent him home. Yeah, and he went home, and of course he's accumulating all these offenses against him. He's accumulating them, and eventually he struck out against the church, against his ex-wife's church. And the people that he wanted to kill were his in-laws, because he thought they were the ones causing all of his problems. Of course, he had other mental problems as well. He was misinterpreting situations. But threat assessment, that's what threat assessment does. Now the problem with threat assessment is that it stigmatizes too many people. So if you're angry, well, it's looking for enemies. And all too often, if we're dealing with the police department, they have already stigmatized select groups of individuals in the community, minorities, African Americans, Hispanics, and potentially natives. They've already identified those select individuals as potential problems. So they've already got one strike against them. And unfortunately, of course, it stigmatizes people and it misidentifies individuals. But if we look at all of the school shootings, if we look at all the mass murders, who's the one doing the shooting? It's not me, but it's my race, okay? I'm not doing it. And for the longest time, I was fine. I'm way too old to be shooting anybody. Nobody, I'm 68, 68-year-olds don't shoot people, and everything was going great until the Las Vegas shooting. And he was 64, a 64-year-old white guy with skin problems. I know, going bald, you know, the whole thing, the whole 9 yards. So before that I was okay, because it was usually a 35-year-old guy or a 42-year-old guy. The guy that shot up the church in just north of San Antonio was 27. But he's another white guy, of course. You arm us with military weapons, and geez, what happens next? Not good things. Okay, I'm stigmatizing it, of course. All right, so that's what threat assessment is all about. So in this room, the person that is the most dangerous isn't Tyrone in the corner, it's me. I'm the most dangerous person in the room. Okay? Using threat assessment. I'm military trained, I know how to use a weapon. Not only that, I shot expert. I'm a good shot. Look at this. Look how steady I am. Huh? I'm the most dangerous person in the room, except I don't have a weapon. So I guess you guys are okay. Most ancient explanations of crime took a religious tone. Crime was either the equivalent to or due to sin. It was because people were sinful. The classical school of criminology emphasized free will to explain criminal conduct. Classical theorists also believed that punishment should fit the crime. So if you stole something, we cut your hand off because that hand did something it wasn't supposed to do. So we'll just cut your hand off, and that will work. And there are still some places where they do that. They'll cut your hand off if you steal something. If you rape somebody, then they will castrate you. Or cut your penis off, which makes it difficult to urinate. Modern theories of crime were developed from the positivist school of criminology, which emphasized factors believed to determine criminal behavior, sociological factors, biological factors, psychological factors, and environmental factors. And whenever something happens, whenever there is a shooter, what do we try to do? We try to figure out, well, where did he live? What was going on with him? Did he have a brain tumor? Why did he shoot people? Did he have a mental illness? I know. We try to figure these things out. And that, of course, is the positivist school of criminology, as interesting as that is. And that's what we're trying to do with what's the latest shooting that we have? The shooting in Jacksonville of the...
Aztec?
No, that was last year.
Yeah, I'm all behind. Yeah, I think it was Florida the most recent.
Wait a minute, wasn't there a shooting? There's a shooting in Dallas.
Florida?
There's another shooting in Florida, in Jacksonville. The cop went into this guy's apartment and shot him. She thought it was her apartment and he was in her apartment. What an idiot. Wait a minute, I live in apartment 345 and this was apartment 344. Wait a minute. Boom, boom, boom. She shot the guy and killed him. It just so happened he was black. Another white policeman shooting a black male. And she was a white female. White female police officer. The positivist school of criminology uses scientific method in the analysis of empirical data. though the conclusions are not taken seriously today. Punishment should fit the criminal, not the crime. This foreshadows rehabilitation as a correctional priority, and the indeterminate sentence as means for achieving it. So rehabilitation that isn't going to work. Punishment should fit the criminal, not the crime. So if somebody murders somebody and they're black, wait a minute, what happens next? Well, that's the way we're doing it in the United States anyway, isn't it? Almost all the people being executed are African American or Hispanic. Why don't we execute white people? Aren't they the ones shooting everybody? I know, but we're not going to execute them, are we? That's just not the way it works. Are we going to, and if somebody's a female, are we going to execute them for shooting somebody? Are we going to execute this police officer for shooting the black guy in his own apartment? Most modern theories of criminal behavior are a legacy of the positivist tradition. The validity of these modern theories varies greatly, as most can account reasonably well for certain types of crimes, but none explains all forms of criminality, and some explain very little. And of course, it does work with, it's kind of like psychology. We're really good with depression, and we're really good with anxiety, but we handle schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. We don't do those very well. And as you become counselors, one of the problems that you're going to have is treating somebody with a psychosis, somebody who's schizophrenic or somebody that's bipolar. You're going to be able to handle people that have borderline personality disorder. You're going to be able to handle people that have depression and people that have anxiety disorder. Because the reality is, the human brain wants to be fixed. So you can't stay depressed for an extended length of time. So even if you don't do anything except talk to this person, they're going to get better. They'd get better anyway, if you could keep them from, killing themselves. Or anxiety. And anxiety is the same way. The brain doesn't want to be scared all the time. So it goes, this is the way it works for these individuals. Sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're not so bad. Okay. So we handle those situations really, really well. People with borderline personality disorder, as long as they've got a boyfriend or a girlfriend, whichever the case may be, this individual is okay. They're fixed, as long as they have somebody to be crazy with. And that person puts up with them. But as soon as that person tries to leave now, all of a sudden they're in crisis. But they're going to get fixed. It's just natural. They're not going to stay in this situation. All they have to do is find another boyfriend and everything's fine. Okay. So there's some things that we're okay with and some things that we're not okay with. Murder is one of those things that we don't handle very well. It doesn't fit anywhere. Who could have figured out that the kid that in Parkland, we could probably have figured that one out. Yeah, because he had this gun fetish that people should have recognized. However, the shooter in Las Vegas makes absolutely no sense at all. This guy's spending millions of dollars a year. Everything's wonderful. He's got a girlfriend a Filipino girlfriend to have sex with. My goodness gracious, the guy had the world on a string. Why in the world does he have to shoot up a concert? Why did he do that? Did you guys come up with any answers at all? You didn't. It doesn't fit any profile, does it? He's too old to shoot, to be a killer. Now, normally, what does age have to do with it? What does age have to do with anything? Testosterone. Yeah, exactly. Testosterone goes down, you mellow out as an old man. You're less likely to off somebody. That's why we don't send old farts to war. They go, well, I don't know if I want to fight today. It doesn't look like they're that bad out there.
Unless you ordered Nugenics. No, I'm just kidding.
We'll give him shots of testosterone. That might work. But he makes no sense whatsoever. So he doesn't fit. And the problem is, are we going to call these people insane? If you do, then you have to let them go. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is shooting somebody an insane act? Well, it seems like it is. So we don't handle this one very well. So nothing in criminology fits. It just doesn't fit. So it's almost impossible, especially the guy in Las Vegas. We knew the guy in San Antonio eventually was going to explode. We should have known that. But who was dealing with him? Not the police. They had never been called in to deal with the guy. So it was psychologists that had to deal with him. And they didn't do a very good job. Why? Because they assume that things are going to get better, just like it does with depression. Things are going to get better. We don't have to worry about this guy offing people. Or shooting up a whole church. Going after his in-laws at church. Nuts. Okay, so we can talk about guys all day long. There's something wrong with them. Everybody knows that. There's something wrong with guys, and it probably has to do with their testosterone level. Probably. Most theories of crime have focused on men, because men commit most crimes. About 3/4 of all arrests are of males, of course, and almost 85% of all the violent crimes are committed by men. The rate of growth in the female inmate population has been substantial in the last 2 decades. Between 1995 and 2008, the number of women in state and federal prisons increased 203%. Wait a minute, we can't house men and women together, that would be a mess. So we have to have special prisons for women. And now we've got an increase of 203% from 1995 to 2008. Now we got a problem because we have to build new prisons for these ladies. We got to do something. Now, one of the interesting things about females that commit crimes has to do with testosterone. If we look at their testosterone levels, they're higher than anybody else's, any other females. So the violent crimes are actually being committed by females with a high testosterone level. Well, maybe anger makes your testosterone go up. It does, but not that much, no. So could we draw all women's testosterone to find out if they're going to commit a violent crime? Let's stigmatize people. Would that work? No, probably not. Because how do you temper testosterone? How do you keep men from all being rapists? There's something that controls the male testosterone level.
Your testes.
Serotonin. Serotonin. So no matter how much testosterone that guy has, he's got serotonin in his brain controlling his aggression and controlling his sex drive. As odd as that may seem.
Serotonin.
Okay.
Because that's what a woman has, right? Serotonin.
Right, yeah, you
More
have
than
serotonin
men.
as well. Right. If you get depressed, you get aggressive. No, potentially that could happen. And that may be the problem that these women are having. That's why they became violent. Their serotonin level went down. They should have gotten depressed, but instead of getting depressed, they got aggressive.
Rage. They don't get angry, they get rage. There's no such thing as anger to women.
Well, not only that, but women have that, monthly cycle thing going on, and all these hormones, these different hormones.
Yeah.
And some of these hormones do one thing, and some of these hormones do something totally different.
And
So
they're totally usually dependent on the environment and the
Right.
intake of whatever
Right.
you're ingesting as well. So that's why it fluctuates so much.
So one of the ways that they control their hormone levels is by taking birth control pills. Birth control pills regulate your hormones. So if you're getting too much of something, you go to the doctor and you say, oh, just before my monthly period, I get really upset and I get really angry. He'll put you on birth control pills, and that will change the hormone level, and it'll change everything. All of a sudden, you don't have those anger issues that you had before. You're not going off once a month for 3 or 4 days.
That's,
Okay.
I don't know, but that seems like to be more of a common thing nowadays than it used to be in the past. With of the cycles. Some women get them, some don't. And some won't get them for 3 months, some won't get them for 6 months, some won't get it for a year, and some won't get it for 2-3 years.
Are we talking about monthly cycles?
Yeah, that deals with
They
the
don't have
hormone levels.
a menstrual period for a year and a half?
Yeah, that's something that women go through that I guess a lot of people don't know or don't talk about, and a lot of that usually deals with...
This is a new one on me.
Personally, I think it's, I don't know, probably something to do with immunizations or something from the mothers or
Well,
different treatments that the mothers might have gotten
I guess we-
before making the baby.
This is, okay.